Hello, welcome to Podfic Galore. I'm your horrible online reader, Grossgaisteiger. I read out loud fanfictions for you busy bees, free of charge and no strings attached. Today I will continue reading the Silmarillion/Lord of the Rings fic by Bloodwing Blackbird from Archive of Our Own called And Now Each Night I Count the Stars. I hope you can at least try to enjoy my voice, and I will try my best for you with the equipment available to me. Note, this fic is rated explicit. On with the show. And now each night I count the stars. Chapter 9. The valley of Imladris was as fair as ever, its many waters lacing the cliffs and hillsides that fenced it round and kept it hidden. For all his purported freedom, something about it still felt like a cage to Maglor, as if he'd find himself trapped, sinking beneath the weight of Elrond's gentleness if he stayed there still too long. Already he could feel the tug of it slowing in his steps. The home of Elrond was, of course, a place of beauty and learning and comfort, for homes reflected those who lived within. Maglor was not certain that he had ever lived in a place that felt like this, that lived and breathed peace in this way. His memory of his own home, over the sea and long abandoned, was tainted by all that had come after, by the discontent that had always been his inheritance, the itching discomfort beneath his skin. Was it any wonder that he now chafed at the softness, at the ease with which Elrond's folk lived in the land? That he fretted at its grief, at the hollow unspoken absence at the heart of Elrond's home, the one that made him ache to reach out again, to play that role that should never have been his, to offer the poor comfort that was all anyone could offer? It would mean nothing now. Less than nothing. He had not known Galabrian. He had no right to that part of Elrond's life. He had never had a right to any part of it. The last time Maglor had come to Imladris, Elrond had chosen to greet him at the door, flanked by counselors and members of his household, as if he were an honored guest. Maglor had passed through the mountains on his way, and it had been an unpleasant journey. Perhaps it had been reasonable that he'd had no appetite for company, but it had been a poor excuse for his behavior. Somehow, he had decided that proper course of action was some lengthy diatribe about inaction and isolation, which had included insulting but alliterative comparisons to several of Elrond's ancestors. He had left soon after. This time, Elrond remained in his chambers, and sent only one of his folk to lead Maglor to his rooms, a tall sylvan woman, far too young to hold any grudges. Indeed, she seemed, if anything, entertained, pleased with her role, laughing dark eyes collecting anything interesting he might do. Maglor did not believe in much, not anymore, but he had absolute faith in the gossip mill of Imladris. He hoped that he'd provide some interest. She brought him to different chambers than the ones he had stayed in before. These rooms were more plain, the furniture a bit worn, as if this was where the things that were no longer fit for nicer rooms had been stored. There were many windows, though, and despite the midwinter chill, several were open. It was enough that he almost felt that he could breathe. He thought that he could even climb out onto the roof if he wished, and look out onto the snowy crags. Maglor had, as he had not since Elrond's childhood, the uncomfortable sensation of being perceived far too clearly. Keeping Elrond out had always taken work, and Maglor was very out of practice. Maglor washed the dust of the road from his face and hands and feet, then he put on the clothes that had been left for him. Here again Elrond had seen too much, for while rich and well made, they were simple, dark, with little ornament and certainly no stars. Thus refreshed, he could delay no further. His boots were not fit for a stable, much less the house of Elrond, so he left them in the room, taking the little packet of waxed cloth filled with summer-smelling fruit with him to seek out Elrond. He found him on a wide terrace overlooking the valley. There was a stone hearth blazing warm, and Elrond sat before this, his robes drawn tight against the cold, furred slippers on his feet. He did not stand when he saw Maglor, but only gestured to a seat across from him. Makler took the seat in the chair with his knee drawn up to his chest and his bare feet drawn up beneath him. Elrond lifted one of his eyebrows and poured a cup of wine. "I brought a gift," said Makler, passing the apricots across the table. It suddenly seemed a pitiful gesture. He looked away as Elrond cut the twine from the battered package. "You needn't have done. Apricots?" "Why apricots?" "Because I love apricots. Remember how you would eat them until you made yourself ill?" Elrond stared at him. "I remember. I was a child then, Makler." Of course. It was a foolish thought. He reached out to take back the packet, but Elrond slid it closer to him. "I am still very fond of apricots." "How fares the Lady of the Golden Wood?" Elrond asked. They had been brought food and drink, something more substantial than the apricots, which were quickly eaten, for though Elrond had insisted Makler share with him, he had seemingly not lost his taste for the fruits. "I could not say." Makler toyed with his food. It was a dish of spiced grains and fragrant white fish, delicious, or so Makler supposed. "My visits with the lady are brief, and she does her best to spy upon all of my thoughts, but is hardly forthcoming about her own." "I wonder if she has any more luck than I do," Elrond said. "I try to tell her what she wishes to hear." Makler frowned and toyed with his food. "No amount of truth will earn me her forgiveness." "I was not under impression that you were seeking it." "We remind each other too much of things that would better be forgotten." "I see." Elrond leaned forward and filled Makler's glass. "What of me, Makler? What story will you weave here?" "I was considering something novel." "Honesty? You?" Elrond chuckled. "Surely not." "You would see through me in any case." "Would I? I thought that I knew you, or knew something of you. I don't believe this anymore." He refilled his own glass and drank deeply. "My daughter would like to meet you before you depart again." "Oh. And what say you?" "My daughter does what she will." "Will you tell me of her? I think that I would like to know her." Elrond gave him a look that said too much and nothing at all. "You may know her for yourself if you'll consent to stay longer than your last visit." Makler almost refused, but then he considered the room, the quiet area that Elrond had offered him, with the rock worn through, and the easy escape of the rooftop, and he reconsidered. "A day or two, I think, if you'll allow it." At that, Elrond smiled, sudden creases at the corner of his eyes, as if this was an expression that had once been more at home on his face than the grave concern to which Makler had grown accustomed. "I shall be glad to have you." "You've been far kinder than I deserve." "That's one of the strange qualities of kindness," said Elrond, quirking one eyebrow. "If it's only bestowed upon the deserving, well, it rather ceases to be kind." He tucked the robe closer about his shoulders. "I feel as if I should apologize." In hindsight, it's quite clear that an exuberant greeting was not going to be well received. "Are you apologizing to me for my own poor behavior?" Elrond laughed. "I suppose I am. Well, I will not say that I enjoyed the way we parted last, but it was hardly the worst wound your tongue has ever dealt. Besides, I don't think I've ever been told, what was it, that I was as useless as a beaver on horseback. Badger in the cavalry, if memory serves." "Do you recall the words you said when you sent us away?" Makler did. He and Maedhros had fought again, the same argument yet again, and Makler had wandered off alone, stewing, planning. The boys had followed him along the riverbank until he had stopped. "You're going after the stones, aren't you? Maedhros told us to get our gear ready." "Did he?" Elros had puffed up a bit. "We want to help you." Makler had spun about then. "You think that you will help us? You think that you have a claim on the works of my father? You are no heir of ours. You are hostages, captives, used as runs, not even worth the price of your keeping. You are bargaining chips, surety of our safety and no more. He had drawn himself upright and looked over their heads, past the memories of flames and blood and oaths taken in anger, past the vision of Elrond and Elrond's with hands as blood-stained and blackened as his own. Go back, get your gear, and then leave. The boys had protested, and Makor had shouted, and they had finally run off. When he had returned, they were gone, along with the gear, and he and Madros had bent their heads to their maps and began to plan. You didn't want to do it, said Elrond, now. Makor's face must have betrayed him. Oh, don't look like that, you old crow. Your walls are still as high as they ever were. Elros overheard you, arguing with Madros. We thought that if we came with you, we thought we could sway him. All three of us. We should have started with that, perhaps. I don't think I would have heard you. We frightened you. I did not want you to become... I never wanted you to become like us. Even then, I understood that. So did Elros. That does not mean we weren't angry. That I'm not still angry, if you wish to know the truth of it. Makor drained his glass. Elrond pushed the bottle across the table without a word. Are you angry that I've come back? Or are you angry that I stayed away? Elrond chuckled at that. Don't make me choose. How is this for an answer? I'm angry that you have come back now. Interpret that as you wish. You know, I did not expect for us to simply return to the way things once were between us. Makor began. How were they, Makor? I saw you through the eyes of a child. I'll not say that I forgot our first encounter, that I do not still dream of the day you came to Sirion and laid waste to our childhood, but I tried to separate the you who was my teacher, my guardian, from the you whom I feared. He looked away from Makor's face. I was not always successful. I never had much luck either. I've missed you many times. I've hated you many times. Ask me what you want to ask me, Elrond. Why? Why did you take us? Why, having already taken our mother from us, could you not have left us among our people? If you were going to send us to the king anyway, why not have done it sooner? We no longer had anything that you wished. Were we truly just hostages? That is what I told myself. It had also been what he told his brother. The twins had likely guaranteed their safety many times in the years they had been together. Makor had found the boys in the aftermath of the fighting, led to their hiding place by a sob, quickly muffled. He had seen himself through their eyes, the fear of their thoughts echoing in his head. Tall and fearsome with a red crest and helm, eyes like flame, his spear tipped with gore. He had seen himself as they saw him, and he had hated himself. I thought that if I could be good, in your eyes, that if I could save you, then I could save myself, maybe save all of us. It was selfishness. I would change it all if I could. I think about it often, Elrond said, about how strange history is. How I, my brother, how neither of us would even exist had it not been for your actions. How I likely owe my very existence to the horror you all wrought at Doriath. My mother would have never fled to the Havens had you not ravaged her first home. I think that my father might never have been born had your father not spurred the Noldor back to these shores. Sometimes it makes me think that all regret is folly, for none of us can say what the cost of our choices shall be. Sometimes Sometimes I'm less philosophical. What is the saying? Evil may bring good into the world, yet its doing remain evil, said Makla. From what I hear, the world has been made better by your presence in it. Well, I was hardly given a choice in the matter, was I? Oh, and here I thought I had heard something rather different about you and your brother. I've made the choice to stay, yes. It seems a choice that must be made anew every day. It seems you've made a similar choice in returning. Something has changed in you. There was an answer to that, but not one that Makler was ready to share. Silence fell between them, and Makler could hear the voice of the river singing in the valley below, still running swiftly despite the cold. The fire had burned low on the breeze and stirred the branches of the pines with soft whisper. You're also much changed, Elrond. You have become wise and powerful, a greater lord than any could have expected, certainly greater than I have ever been. I look back at the sum of my life and see only the harm I have caused. Now I am a wanderer. I have no home, and I may claim to no rank, but I think that, if I can, I would like to see if I can correct the balance, at least a bit. A worthy ambition, but a bit too grand an aspiration for this evening, I think. He stood and wrapped his arms about himself. For now, come inside with me. It is cold. Makor did not sleep that night. For all their talk had woken the voices from ages long past, had made him wonder if there had been salvation that he'd been too afraid to see, a choice that could have spared his brother. Or forced me to an even greater sin, Madros said. It had indeed been easy to climb out of the dormer and onto the roof, and there to perch atop the ridge, looking at the stars above. You can't say what would have happened. Nor can you. When Maklo turned to argue, his brother was gone, the memories traveled light. Maklo stayed and watched the stars wheel in the gold sky above, wishing for the warm sound of Halbara's breath at his side. Even in winter, songbirds filled the valley of Imladris, and they began their concert long before the sun rose. Maklo left his perch with them and went out, walking in the valley. The pines still bore their soft green needles, but there was moisture up high, and a rime of frost crusted many of their upper branches, making them sparkle as the sun spilled over the lip of the bowl of the valley. Maklo thought he could smell ice. He walked long, through tended gardens that were lovely even in winter, and through the vineyards and the orchards of Imladris. He stopped beneath a row of espaliered trees, their leaves gone, but few shriveled fruits and their pips below, identifying them as apricots. Makler pushed at one with the toe of his boot, rueful. The Lord of Imladris had not needed his meagre offering after all. Past the orchard were tender groves with many paths lined with white stone. These eventually wended their way to the feet of the mountains, where the land became wilder again, but still wholesome, all of it suffused with the peace of Imladris, with the strange pulse of Elrond's power. He could almost find it restful. It was approaching noon when he returned to the house, much more lively than he had left it in the still of the morning. He found Bilbo sitting on the same terrace where he and Elrond had spoken the night before, wrapped in a coat of fur with a collar that came almost to his nose. Maklo thought that he looked like a very small bear, but one that was fond of pipeweed. "Good morning," Bilbo called. Maklo glanced at the sky where the sun was riding high overhead. "Morning is long gone, Master Baggins, though I'll still wish you a good one," he replied, mounting the steps to the terrace. "May I join you?" Of course, of course." He shifted himself so that Maklo could have a space to sit and gestured to his pipe. "Do you mind? Most of the folk around here don't seem to like the smell." Maklo felt at his pockets and pulled out the pipe that Halbaran had given him. "I don't mind, as long as you're willing to share a bit of your leaf. I've left mine upstairs." Bilbo laughed. "Of course." He passed Maklo a little wooden box. "It is nice to have someone to smoke with. It has been too long since Gandalf visited us. He's busy with something important and frightening, I should think." "That seems most likely. I've been well." Maklo looked at him closely. He had been told that Bilbo was quite old for a hobbit, but he seemed hale enough, at least to Muckler's inexpert eye. I have indeed, very well, I should say. It is hard to be any other way here, you know, he said, puffing at his pipe. Although, the last time you were here, I thought you had perhaps mastered the art. I should ask your pardon for that, he said to the hobbit. I am not over fond of crowds, and had not expected to find myself at the center of one. Oh, is that why you called Master Elrond a white-livered milksop? Bilbo asked quite innocently before sending a very respectable smoke ring into the branches of the pine above them. Was that what I said? Asked Muckler. It was, answered Glorfindel with a smile that was just the slightest bit predatory. It has a certain charm, does it not? He waved away the smoke and wrinkled his nose as he came onto the terrace. Elrond sent me to see if you would like to take the midday meal with him. Ah, Glorfindel. What was it that I called you? I? You called me a daisy-headed mooncalf. Muckler murmured to Bilbo. Did you know that he was one of the House of the Golden Flower back in Gondolin? Oh, I see, Bilbo nodded. I thought it was only for his hair. You have an eye for detail. Glorfindel only smiled wider. Then what shall I tell Elrond? I can come to him now. He knocked the last of the smouldering leaf from his pipe into the great hearth, then paused for a moment. My thanks, Glorfindel. I'm sure you have better things to occupy your time with than escorting me about the valley. Indeed. You'll find him in his chambers. Muckler left Glorfindel and Bilbo there to discuss his many shortcomings and went to seek out Elrond. Elrond had set up a table in one of his studies and had laid it with simple fare, a golden loaf of bread, white cheese, and a plate of fruit. Elrond was not alone, but rather in conversation with a woman, both like him and unlike. Muckler had seen Arwen only once before, at the previous winter's disastrous reunion, and now bitterly rued that he had not conducted himself with greater dignity. Muckler, allow me to introduce my daughter, Arwen. Muckler dipped his head. I'm honored. She smiled, and for an instant she could almost have been her grandmother. Muckler caught his breath. As am I. My father has spoken of you frequently in these recent years. I have heard quite a few stories that have been very informative. I wish I had known some of them sooner. She glanced at her father, who busied himself slicing an apple. I know you have much still to say to each other, so I'll not intrude long. My father tells me, though, that you find it burdensome to sit idle in his house. Does he? She smiled. I'm certain he will tell you that I often feel the same way. I will go riding this afternoon. Should you wish for relief from your boredom, I would welcome companionship. Thank you, lady. She inclined her head and left them. She is very like you, Muckler said when the door had closed. So we are often told, said Elrond. Come, let us eat. I suppose it would be inappropriate for me to ask why things are strained between the two of you. Elrond froze and then spread the slices of apple on the plates. I forgot that you do that. Do what? See exactly the thing I want to hide. Really? I was just thinking that about you. Well, I must have learned that skill from someone. He took a seat. You are correct, of course. You know they say my daughter is the image of Luthien Tinuville born again. I never had the pleasure, but I did see her from a distance once. Enough to say that they speak truly. Well, the resemblance runs somewhat deeper than mere form. Elrond sighed. It would seem that my daughter must also share the doom of Luthien. I see. And what bright prize shall her suitor bring you, now that the Silmarils are no more? I'm not as cruel as Thingol. I only ask that he claim the kingship of Gondor and Arnor. Ah, only a trifle then, said Muckler, spreading some soft cheese on a hunk of bread. We speak of son of Aratharn, do we not? I assume that you'd not have set him this task were he another. At Elrond's nod, he continued. It is not my place to say so, but there are worse choices she might have made. I hear that you've been traveling with his folk. I'm glad you found welcome there. You do seem more at peace than a year ago. Perhaps I am, said Maklar. I said last night that I have no home, so perhaps it makes sense that I've found a place among the Dunedain. He thought of Halbarda's embrace, of his slope-shouldered gait, and the sound of his slow, steady footfalls on the road. Your home is a wonder, Elrond, but I am eager to return to them. Elrond looked closely at him, as if he could see that which Maklar did not say. You speak of them, but your eyes look only to one. Now whose is too much? Elrond only laughed and poured the wine. I think that you and my daughter will have much to say to each other. End of chapter 9. Stay tuned.